Hi, I'm Father Joseph Mary, and welcome back to A Simple Word, where we reflect on the gospel for the coming Sunday. Zaleucus was a powerful king in the Greek city of Locri around 500 BC. His reign was characterized by a justice guarded with severity. In one of his decrees, he forbade the use of wine unless it were for medicinal purposes. And in another, he decreed that all adulterers be punished with the loss of both their eyes. But to the king's dismay, his own son was caught in the act of adultery. And so in order to maintain the integrity of his laws, but also to show mercy to his son, the king voluntarily shared the penalty. He ordered one of his own eyes to be put out, along with one of his sons. And in this way, the justice of his government was maintained, and also some limited vision. We live in a time when so many individuals, so many groups are clamoring for justice. But what do we mean by justice? And more importantly, is our justice the justice of God? In this Sunday's gospel, we hear the familiar story of the wedding feast at Cana. As with almost everything in John's gospel, there's so much going on here. You could preach 20 homilies on this one short passage. Cana was a village so near to Nazareth that you could catch a glimpse of one city from the border of the other. And Mary had been invited to the wedding, and she held a special place in preparing the arrangements. She was clearly worried when the wine ran dry, and she acted with a certain authority in telling the servants what to do. In one of the apocryphal Coptic Gospels, Mary was said to be the sister of the groom's mother. But whatever the case, it's clear Mary has a special role in this wedding celebration. In Palestine in the time of Christ, the Jewish law laid down that the wedding of a virgin should take place on a Wednesday. And the ceremony ordinarily took place very late in the evening, after a magnificent feast. And following the wedding ceremony, the newlyweds were guided and serenaded by the guests with lit torches and processed throughout the village streets to their new home. Ordinarily, the wedding ceremony lasted 7 full days. And during this time, the bride and the groom were treated like royalty. These were days of immense celebration, when the troubles and the hardships of daily life were replaced with music and dancing and wine. But something goes very, very wrong in this wedding celebration. The wine's running empty. Now, how does this happen? It's likely that Jesus himself was the cause of the problem, because he arrives with several of his disciples, uninvited guests who had been journeying for 3 days and had covered a distance of nearly 90 miles. They were probably so thirsty and so hungry, it's a wonder the food didn't run out as well. But the wine's nearly gone. Now, this may seem like an unfortunate annoyance to us if it happened today, but for the Jewish newlyweds, this would have been a tragedy. The rabbis wrote, "Without wine, there is no joy." Hospitality was regarded as a sacred duty, and a wedding feast in which the wine ran dry would have been a terrible humiliation for this couple. Right away, Mary sees the problem. Without being asked, Mary discerns the situation and the suffering of this young couple, and what does she do? She brings everything to her son. She approaches Jesus and she says very matter-of-factly, "They have no wine." And how does Jesus respond? He tells his mother, "Woman, what is this to you and to me?" Now that sounds like a strange, even a harsh reply from a son to his mother. It's an accurate translation of the Greek, "Ti moi kai soi gainai." But it loses the tone and the nuance of the original Hebrew. This is what happens in translation. In Hebrew, this saying was a very common phrase in conversation. When spoken sharply, it indicated a disagreement and reproach. But when uttered gently, it implied a misunderstanding or even a question. And so it could be more literally translated as, "Woman, do you understand what's happening here? Do you understand what you're asking? And then Jesus says something very cryptic. He says to his mother, my hour has not yet come. What's going on in all this? Why does Jesus refer to his mother as woman? And what's this hour that he's talking about? We have to remember that John is writing to both a Greek and a Jewish audience. And he knows that his Jewish audience has been awaiting the promised Messiah for long centuries. An audience that's intimately familiar with the Torah. An audience that's suffered long in waiting for the reparation of the original sin of Adam and Eve. And what happened in that garden? The woman approached the bridegroom, and she shared with him the fruit of death. And the metaphorical wine ran dry. They lost joy. They lost paradise. Sin and death flooded God's creation. This was the hour of darkness. As Jesus would say to Judas in the Garden of Gethsemane after being betrayed by a kiss, this is your hour, the time for the power of darkness. And now, at this wedding feast, the new Eve approaches the true bridegroom. And she says they have no wine. There is no joy. They lack the grace of God. And Jesus addresses her even as God the Father addressed Eve in the garden, calling her woman. And Jesus responds, do you understand what you are asking? Remember, for 30 years, Jesus had lived the hidden, private life of a carpenter alongside his mother in Nazareth. Now he's telling her, if I do what you're asking, it all begins. I will reveal myself, and I have to leave you behind. And what's this hour Jesus refers to? Remember what he said at the Last Supper, as he was preparing to go to Gethsemane and to begin his passion. Father, the hour has come. Give glory to your Son, so that your Son may glorify you. And Jesus reveals the glory of God when he's lifted up on the cross. This is the glory of God. This is the hour of triumph. This is the hour that he's talking about. And what is the glory of God? It's the revelation of his justice. The cross reveals the justice of God. And what is this justice? It's mercy that dies for the sake of love. This is the glory of the Father. This is the justice of God. And Jesus is telling his mother, if I do this, it has to begin. And what's her response? With absolute faith and with childlike conviction, she turns to the servants and she tells them, do whatever he tells you. She's telling her son, yes, I understand. It's time. Your hour has come. Reveal yourself. And with her faithful consent, Jesus begins his public ministry. And he reveals himself to his disciples and to the enemy. Today, this gospel challenges us in so many ways. But at its heart, in a very profound sense, it challenges our concept of justice. Because if we're honest with ourselves, our sense of justice, it's characterized by self-centeredness and retribution. When someone offends us, when someone speaks against us, when things don't go the way we planned, we demand an accounting. How dare my children disobey me? How dare my wife oppose my will? How dare anyone speak to me that way? How dare my boss not notice my hard work? How dare that thief? How dare that lazy homeless person? How dare that murderer? Our justice is a justice of condemnation. And how far is this from the justice of God? The glory of God that Jesus promises to reveal on the cross is a justice imbued with mercy and flowing from divine love. This gospel challenges us to look very closely at how we respond to those who challenge us, who oppose us, who sin against us, and to ask ourselves with the honest simplicity of Mary, is my justice the justice of God? I want to invite anyone interested to accompany me this summer on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, where we'll visit the places where Jesus and his apostles walked and learn in a deeper way the context of the gospel that we hear every Sunday.